have everything backwards. And I'm going to have some of that in my talk, so I'll do one today. And then on Friday, when I have my second talk, I'll also do some talking about business, because I'm very passionate about how bad some of the big companies are and mistreating their employees, and then wondering why the employees don't like them. Well, good reason for not liking them, because they're being cheated. So that's a very simple observation to make, but it's true. But first, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about my life, and it's a little bit awkward for me because I'm not used to talking about myself. And I'm usually talking about space programs or something. But at this point in my life, I'm looking back, wondering how in hell I did so many different things. How did I have two lives? During the day as an engineer and a scientist, and at night as a folk singer. I'm not sure how I could pull that off, but somehow it worked out. And both of them were fulfilling to me, because I needed something spiritual and something involving people in my life. And when you're doing flight dynamics calculations, there's not a lot of personal elements. And the people you work with usually don't have any personality and not interested. In fact, I had several people who worked for me, and they were saying, I hate it when somebody has feelings about something. You got to stick to the facts. That's what's important. So there's two different worlds, and I was in two different worlds, and trying to manage both of them at the same time. And now we're getting quite a few people. This is good. Okay, so this is the way it goes. Everybody comes in right at the last minute, so I think we're going to be okay here. So I was born in July 2nd, 1934, and that was the height of the meltdown of the finances. The Depression, everybody thinks started in 1929, but it really didn't start in 1929. It took a while for things to happen, and a while for everybody to lose their job, and a while for the government to run out of money. But the time I was born, my father, who had had a very good middle management job and was hoping to become the chief financial officer of a large corporation, not only did his company go out of business and he lost his job, but foolishly he had invested a sizable amount of money that he'd earned in the stock market, and rather than investing in diversifying and investing in some standard things, he picked out some oddball things that he thought were really going to take off, like gold mines that didn't even exist. And I don't know, he was smart in some ways, but foolish in his investments. So he ended up not only losing his job, but losing all his money. But he wasn't alone in that. A lot of other people who were doing very well in 1928, by 1934, they were really in trouble. And since my father didn't have any money, he had one thing going for him, and that is that he lived on a gentleman farm. A gentleman farm, basically, it was in the wealthiest part of Rhode Island, and everybody had these huge mansions. But my father just rented a farmhouse and had a farm because he liked farms, and he'd grown up on a farm. So it appealed to him to live with having a cow and having the chickens and the hogs and the sheep and so on. And after work, he would come out and he'd work on it. And he had three Portuguese people working for him on the farm who did the cleaning up of everything and the shoveling the manure and all that stuff. And when he lost all his money, he could no longer pay them. But he made a deal with them, which they were fine with, and that is that they could share in the food, so that they wouldn't starve. And if they could sell some of it, they could make some money from that, because there was a lot going on the farm. I mean, we had pigs that were dying, and there was all that meat, and you couldn't only eat so much of it before it went bad. So, he made a deal. He wouldn't pay them anything, but they could stay on and help him the way they did before. They didn't speak English either, which made it very difficult for them to get a job. And my father could speak to them, so that was something they liked. And they had a good relationship anyway, because he was nice to them. So we had three Portuguese farm workers working for our farm, and my mother would can all the vegetables and put them in the root cellar. We had a you could see it in this picture, a little bit hump in the background near the barn. It was underground. You went down about 20 feet or more, and it was cold down there all summer long. So that's where we kept. It was like a refrigerator. We kept things in there. Meanwhile, all around me were these huge mansions, and so the kids I played with are all coming from rich families and so on. And so here's my twin brother. As most of you know, I have a twin brother, or had one. He died. It's about 10 years ago this picture was taken. He's in the blue shirt. And we came back to see our childhood home. It was sort of an emotional experience for us. Unfortunately, the owner of the house was on vacation to somewhere, so we weren't able to really go through the house, particularly the barn. We wanted to go through the barn because that's where we played as kids. And I played up in the loft of the barn, not realizing that all the mice had been pooping up there, and I had allergies, and I was wondering why I had asthma all the time. Well, looking back on it, I was obviously allergic to the mouse feces or whatever, and I was playing in it all day long. So I'd be wheezing like crazy, and that was another story. So my mother didn't have enough breast milk to feed two babies. She was only 4'10" because she had been growth had been stunted when she was paralyzed when she was young. So my father fed me from a bottle, and that meant that my brother had the breast milk and he didn't have allergies, but I wasn't privileged to that. The other hand, though, it was good for me because I bonded with my father. So at age 4, you'd find me in the barn shoveling manure with my father, milking the cow, and my twin brother was in the kitchen helping my mother cook lunch. And so we developed different personalities. I was much more masculine than he was. And I won't go into details about that, but it did change his personality. So that's me on the left, and my twin brother on the right, and my big brother, who was really big to us at that time. He's 2 years older, in the middle. And here's the schoolhouse. Now, it only had 2 big rooms in it. One of them had 1st and 2nd grade, and the upper one had 3rd and 4th grade. So a part of the time you listened to the other class going on. And my brother and I were very excited when we were going to school because I wanted to learn something. So when I got there, the teacher said, "We want all of you to take out your Dick and Jane books. We have a student in our class named Dick. And I want you to open the book and read the first page." So I opened the book and I read, "Fun with Dick and Jane" by William S. Gray and May Arlington, illustrated by Eleanor Campbell and Keith Ward. Basic Readers Curriculum Foundation Series. A revision of the Elson Gray Basic Readers, Scott Forsman and Company. I thought I did a pretty good job reading it, but I wasn't too sure how to pronounce Eleanor. And then I looked over at the teacher to see if I did it all right. And she said, mouth is wide open. She's staring at me in astonishment. And she said, I'm sorry, Dickie. I want you to read the next page. So I turned to the next page, and there was a picture of a boy running. And I read, Run, Dick, Run. Very good, Dickie, the teacher said. Now we have a girl in our class named Jane, and I would like Jane to read the next page. So Jane read, Run, Dick, Run. Well, the second grade class was also in the same room. So later in the morning, when the teacher taught math in that class, my twin brother and I blurted out all the answers. Whenever she'd ask, what is this times that, or something, we would immediately answer. And the teacher got mad. She said, you're both in first grades. Please give the second grade students the chance to answer these. So we were being put down for being involved with the class. It was a little bit puzzling to me. Is this what school is like? So at lunch break, the teacher took my twin brother Dan and I to the back of the class, and she had a bunch of books, and we read different ones. And she said, you're reading on a fifth grade level. And then she showed some math problems, and that's where Dan and I were really good. We could solve anything in our head without writing anything down. So she took out a full sheet of paper and she wrote, and I don't know what the numbers were, but they were big numbers like this, 756 times 3854. And she handed me the paper, and she expected me to put them on the paper and then do the solution there. But I was used to doing things in my head, so I just thought about it for a while, and then I said 2013624. Well, meanwhile, she'd been doing it herself on another piece of paper. She was a little slower than I was. When she got the answer, it was the same one I got. She said, I'm absolutely astonished. I've been teaching math for 16 years, and I couldn't possibly do that in my head. So apparently, my brother and I had a particular skill in math, and that was with me most of my life. In fact, maybe 15 years ago, let's say, I was at a party, just a group of 7 people, and we're all at a restaurant. And it turns out that they can't really split the cost up because some people share drinks and all this kind of thing. So they just told us the total amount. And so everybody's at the table, and they're saying, well, why don't we add 18% to the amount, and then we'll divide it by 7, and we'll know what each person owes. And I said, it's 26.43. And they said, ha, 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 very funny. And so somebody had a calculator, and they got the calculator out, and then they added all the things up, and then they added 18%, and they divided by... So it turned out I was right. I was flabbergasted. How did you do that? Oh, I don't even know how I did that. I mean, I used to just be able to do that in my head. Because in my work, it was very handy because I could do complicated math right in my head. And I'd be at symposiums, and people would say, well, we really need to run that through and calculate it. And I'd say, excuse me, it's 423 kilograms at an angle of 12. Just had that ability to do that. Anyway, the next day, back to the first grade. Next day, my mother came to the class to have a conference. Now, my mother was a 4th grade teacher, so she knew all about what that would be like. The teacher wanted us to go directly into the 4th grade, and we were only 6 years old. And my mother said they will be tormented by the older boys and be miserable. And the sports, they won't be able to do any sports because these kids will be 3 times as big as they are. And so what happened? We were put in the back of the classroom, and we were really like outcasts, and we weren't allowed to say anything. You know, if nobody knew the answer, and they were all puzzling about something, we couldn't say, "Excuse me." We had to keep our mouth shut. That was one of the rules. But we did. We read a lot of nice books. I read a whole series English stories and everything. I really enjoyed those. And And I had a girlfriend in the class. Well, we were allowed to sing. That's the one thing, and we were really good singers because my father was a professional singer. He was an actor. He acted in musicals, and so he's an actor and a singer. And we grew up with listening to my parents sing. My parents sang in harmony. In fact, I thought back on it. I have perfect pitch. I know immediately what notes should be. And I thought the reason I have it probably is because my parents were singing even before I was born. So when I was in the womb, I was listening to people singing. And my parents had perfect pitch because my father was a professional singer. My mother was very good. So that's probably where I learned that. But anyway, that was the good part. We could sing. So. And the Christmas pageant, they tried to get the fourth grade students to read from the Bible. They needed somebody to narrate the Christmas pageant, but none of them could do it because the words are different and the pronunciation of some of the names and everything were difficult. So they finally had us ask my twin brother and I to do it. Now, we were both acolytes. My twin brother and I, during a church service in the Episcopal Church, we were up on the altar and reading from the Bible and so on. I look back on that, I realize again that was probably unusual for somebody our age, 6 years old, to be doing that. But we came from a religious family. We were used to hearing how to pronounce words and everything. So anyway, in the Christmas pageant, Dan was on one side of the stage and I was on the other, and we took turns reading from the Bible. And then the older boys were the wise men and Joseph and Mary, and the young first graders were animals in the manger. And at the end of the performance, Dan and I sang a duet in harmony, Silent Night. And I look back on it, my twin brother was amazing musical talent. He created harmonies that were perfect. He never had been trained whatsoever, but he just had an instinct how to harmonize. And they weren't just a third up on every single note or anything. He had really complicated things that he put into harmonize that were wonderful. I don't know how he knew how to do that, but it was. I mean, I had the easy job. I just sang the melody. So, but I had a louder voice. That was one thing. I had much stronger voice than he had. So at that point, at 6 years old, I suddenly realized that we're not like other kids. We have like a magic power to know the answers. But now I know that I have some very serious deficiencies in my brain. The first one is I have face blindness. And some of you know that. I have trouble recognizing people's faces, and I can't read music for that reason. Because when you read music, you look at these little dots, and you immediately know that's a major C chord. You don't have to go through and say every good boy likes fun or whatever. You just look at it, you know what chord that is. And the other thing is I have ADHD. I'm hyper. So unless there's some urgency, I can't stay focused on one thing. I'm going back and forth I'm doing 3 things all at once and everything, which isn't too good. And I can't memorize things. My first wife had total recall, which so when somebody would come up to me and I had no idea who they were, partly because of my face blindness and partly because of my memory, my wife would say, "Oh, Frank, how have you been? Dick, this is Frank from such a..." Oh, and he would say, "Oh, Dick knows me." I hadn't any idea who the guy was. But my wife was covering for me. She was very handy to have a wife that had remembered every single thing in her life, every single word that anybody... The bad news was she remembered that 52 years ago I had told her she was stupid. I said, "Will you ever forget that?" No, you said I was stupid. So that was the downside of having a wife who had total recall. So I'm going to talk a little bit about business now, and then I'll get back to my life story. My twin brother and I didn't think our older brother was very smart. One reason is because when he couldn't solve something in his homework, that either Dan and I could immediately solve it and help him with it. But he surprised us becoming the vice president of Boeing Aircraft and the director of the electronics division. And the reason he was good at that, he was pretty smart as an engineer. I realized that we were a lot smarter than most people, but he was pretty good. But the thing that he was wonderful at is knowing how to deal with people and knowing how to be a manager. And also in sales, because as the director of the electronics division, he had to often be involved in a big contract negotiation and so on. And my brother had that perfect combination of being a nice, genuinely nice person and caring for his workers, but not allowing any BS and not allowing anybody to do anything illegal or whatever. If they tried to cross him, they saw another side of his personality. He's really tough. Typically in Boeing, what they did, every time they finished a contract with the government, they laid off about 10 or 20% of their employees, because what they wanted to do is they wanted to get the quarterly bonuses for the stock, and the best way of doing that is to get rid of all the cost. Well, my brother convinced them, at least in his electronics division, it took 2 years when you hired somebody before they could do anything. So if you lay them off every time the contract is complete, you're starting all over every time with somebody new, and they're not useful at all until you have the 2 years go by. So he convinced his manager to allow him to keep everybody, and if they didn't have a job, then he created one for them. He thought, well, what we really need is a new guidance system that does this or does that. He'd just make these things up. Well, lo and behold, they would design it. Next thing you know, it turned out one of the major things they sold. So it was working out for him, and his division was the most profitable by far of any division of Boeing. So the management had to sort of back off with him. And the other thing he did, rather than micromanaging everybody and telling them what to do all the time, he just empowered people to make decisions. He hired people that he thought were very qualified, and then set some specifications that he wanted, and they could do the solution any way they wanted to. And this was unique in a big company. Usually they have all kinds of staff meetings and they try to tell people how to do things, but my brother didn't believe in that. He believed that they knew better than he did how to do things. So he empowered them, and he paid them much higher wages than any other part of the company. And there was a little bit of protest from other parts of the company, but he could easily justify it because they were so profitable compared to the rest of the company. Well, finally, when my brother got to be about 60 years old, the new CEO, who was about to retire, wanted those quarterly bonuses. And so he called my brother in and he said, I know you never lay people off, but I am demanding that you lay off 24% of your employees by next month. And my brother explained why he didn't do it and how stupid that was. And the guy said, no, I want those bonuses because I'm going to leave this company, and I want to leave with a high amount of money. So my brother said, well, you do it. I'm quitting. And he left at age 60, never came back to the company. They tried to get him back, but he wouldn't come back. And ever since then, he's been fishing and hiking and doing all the things that he loves. He was a ski champion. He used to be in the ski patrol and everything. So now at 90, at 93, he was pulling his boat, his 17-foot boat, out of the water, and he hurt his leg, and it didn't get better. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, now who's your primary doctor?" And my brother said, he's 93 years old. He said, "Primary doctor?" He said, "Yeah, who prescribes your medicines?" "Medicines?" He said, "I don't take any medicines." Turned out he'd never had a doctor, never took any, like blood pressure or cholesterol medicine or anything. And now at 93, he's the first time, and so they had to run some tests and everything. But he still doesn't take any medicines, and he's still out there every day. He goes down to Mexico in the winter to get away from the rain in Seattle, and he drives all the way down there himself, all by himself, and he hauls his boat out of the garage and puts it in the water. He's really quite remarkable. So, what do companies do wrong? What they basically do is they're upside down the way they hire people, the way they pay people, the way they treat people, and then they wonder why nobody likes them, and they're getting the strikes, and the employees are using malicious compliance and so on. So, in my opinion, well, you need to pay people what they're worth. And it's not always easy in a big company because there are all these union rules and everything. But the problem is, if you don't pay people, if you try to nickel and dime them, the best employees are unhappy, so they get another job, and what you're left with is all the worst employees. So you're left with people who are not motivated and not skilled, and who you really don't want to have, and that's you're stuck with them. And then you accept a contract from the government that's based on the number of hours worked, not on what you accomplish. So the incentive is to make each job last as long as possible. On the other hand, if you use up the number of hours you're allowed, then you let the thing go, even though it hasn't been fixed yet, even though there's a problem. So later on, the door comes off when they're up in the air and so on, because you just ignored something that was obviously bad and you didn't fix it. And big companies, as I mentioned before, lays a worker when the contract's finished. Well, who wants to be motivated if they know that the moment they finish with this contract, they're going to be out of a job? You don't have any loyalty to the company if they don't care about you. And the health plan in most companies is either very, very bad or it's totally dishonest. My son Tom worked for a company in Cheshire, and their health plan was they paid if in one single day your health expenses were more than $3,000, then they paid for that. Well, they knew that almost never are your expenses more than $3,000. Even when you're in the hospital, they're normally less than $3,000. So they knew that really they never would have to pay anything. But if they did have to pay, it turned out they didn't have an insurance company. They were self-financed. So they were the ones who decided whether it was a legitimate claim or not. And there was some question whether they ever had paid a cent to anybody. Meanwhile, they were deducting everybody's pay for this so-called health plan, and they had some fixed amount that they pretended the insurance company was charging them, but it was self-financed, so they really weren't paying anything. So basically, it was just another way of reducing somebody's salary on a pretense that had no basis. So my theories on how to run a business: first of all, the most productive employee in most companies is 4 times more valuable than the worst. particularly in engineering, particularly in the creative work and so on. There's so many times I've worked over the years with different companies, and there's one guy who is just brilliant, and he's coming up with all the new designs and inventing things and so on. But he's not paid 4 times as much as the other employees. Sometimes he's paid less because they pay people based on how long you work for the company. So here's the very best employee you have who's doing all these incredible things, and you're paying him less than some guy who is just, cruising to the finish line. He's 64 years old and he has no incentive to work at all, but he's being paid more than you because of seniority and so on. So I believe that you should pay people what they're really worth, and I did that in my company. And the amazing thing was I could get anybody to work for me. So I wanted to have somebody teach my seminars. I decided that I didn't have time to we developed a business that started out just a way of getting sales, but after a while we were teaching 3 times a year. We were teaching these seminars with a lot of people and so on. And so I didn't have the time. So I needed somebody, but I needed somebody who was really smart and who understood the math. Well, I ended up getting an MIT professor because he wasn't being paid twice what anybody else was. He was maybe getting 10% more than the guy next to him. Oh, I just doubled his pay immediately, and but a week later he's putting in his notice and coming to work for me, and he worked for me for 15, 20 years after that. And he was happy, and I was happy. And not only did he teach these seminars, but he was world famous. Everybody knew him, and he helped me design things and did a lot of drawings for me and so on. It was wonderful to have somebody like that. And so I was paying twice as much as he was getting before, but that was nothing compared to what he was worth. Health care. The U.S. government does not provide health care for people under 65 years old. Therefore, in my opinion, the employer should provide it, because we need people working for a company. We need everybody to be well. If you're not paying them, often what happens is the guy comes to work even though he's sick, and everybody else gets infected. And so nowadays, not only isn't he doing anything because he's sick, but he just made 4 people in his office get sick. So what I did is I paid 100% health care for my employee, his wife, and his children. The whole family, I paid 100%. I don't mean he didn't have to pay 20%, or he didn't have to have some rule about what things were allowed and what things weren't allowed. I just paid 100% for everybody. And it was very expensive, particularly as time went on. But the amazing thing, well, I don't have time to tell you the story. I'll just tell you in 2 words here. Amazing thing, I finally decided it was just too expensive for the company. And I gave some managers a choice of 3 different plans that paid 80% and didn't pay for the children and so on. And I asked them to come back in a month and tell me which one they would want to have. And when the month was up, they had elected a chairman of their group. And I said, well, which one did you choose? And he said, we didn't choose any of the ones that you gave us. I thought, oh, no, here we go. They were going to... Well, a friend of mine had already had his company go on strike when he tried to lower the health pay system. So I was a little wary of that. I thought, oh, wait. What they said is, we want the old plan, and we're willing to pay for it. So we will take a deduction in our pay to equal the amount of these ones that you're proposing. So on their own, these people chose to make less money and keep the old health plan. I mean, that was interesting to me. So they felt very happy about that that their pay had been reduced, and everybody was fine, and I was fine with it too. Bonus plans. So many companies have phony bonus plans. They have this complicated formula, and there's administrative expenses, and there's overhead, and there's this, and there's that. Well, you have no idea what's going on. And at the end of the year, it turns out that you get 2% increase on your pay. And it's all phony. They're basically giving you 2%. Even companies that I owned did that. I owned companies that were in Japan and Korea and so on. And when I first took over the companies, I found they had these phony bonus plans. They'd wait until the whole end of the year, and then it would just turn out that because of overhead expenses or whatever, that everybody got 2%. Well, that's BS. That's what kind of incentive is that? You know it's fishy, and so why strain yourself when that's going to be the bonus? Well, what I did is I had a very simple bonus plan based on the volume of shipments, and everybody could see that number. Easy for anybody to check it up and know what it was. And because I realized that if we ship more in a month but having the same expenses, then we're making a lot more money. So people really took off. I mean, they could make as much as 30% increase in their pay if things went well for a month. So it was a big incentive, and people were running rather than walking. And if a new employee came to my company and he was looking at porn sites on his computer when he should be working, his manager didn't have to come over and say anything. All the other employees gave him hell and explained that in this company we work hard and we don't do anything that isn't productive for the company, and so you better shape up. And they did, because the incentive is strong when your worker next to you is really angry and sees you're not doing it. So new employees sometimes would say to their boss, "I've never worked for a company where everybody is doing nothing but working." I mean, all of my other companies I work for, they're fooling around, buying a new pair of shoes on the internet while they're supposed to be designing a rocket launcher, and And then the other thing, the one more thing that I had is I told my employees, always tell the truth. Tell the truth to the customer. Tell the truth to the employees you work with. Just make sure that you always tell the truth. It's amazing. It's amazing how good that is. So many times in my life, a purchasing agent would call, and he would say, Mr. Boynton, the contract is overdue, and there hasn't been any shipment, and I want to know what's going on over there in your company. And I'd say to him, well, tell you the truth, this is more difficult than we thought it was. So we're trying a new design now. We tried one and it didn't really work. But we're trying another one, and I can give you the details if you'd like. He said, no, that's all right. He said, well, aren't you telling me that some vendor didn't supply things it was supposed to? No, all the vendors were good. Well, aren't you telling me that you had a power outage from weather? No, I'm not telling you that. Well, this guy said to me, well, that's a relief. The first time he's ever been honest with me. Let me tell you something. We're late in producing our satellite. So we don't need your instrument right now. We won't need it for another 3 months. So let me just slip the delivery date to another 3 months. You look good on paper, I'll look good. And thank you very much for telling the truth. So it was amazing how that worked. And for the employees themselves, the fact that They didn't have to remember what lie they told the customer. Since they told the truth, nobody had to say, what did you tell him? We're doing, and so on. By being honest, it was amazing how that worked. So that was another belief I had in how businesses should be run and how we should, particularly treat the customers, treat them with honesty. Because they're not stupid, and they know when they're being lied to, and they always find out anyway. Everybody knows everything in this world. Somehow they'd call some person in a company that didn't know what was going on, and he'd say, "Oh, they haven't even started that." All of a sudden now you've got big problems, and because we never had that problem. We never knew what lie you had to tell because we were telling the truth, and that's so easy to do it that way. All right, well, I can see time goes by very fast here, so I wanted to end maybe with a little one of my stories. This is one that some people have liked in the past. So I'm going to be... I'll tell you this one more thing here. I could have a brother or sister in France who was 17 years older than I am. My father went to France in the First World War. I'm probably the only person here at Elam Park who had a father who was fighting in the First World War. Well, I'm not that old, but it happened. My father was 37 years old when I was born, and he was 20 years old when he went to France. So that's how that was possible. So he went to France. His whole class in college at Amherst decided they were going to volunteer to fight in the war because they wanted to be patriotic. So they all resigned from their senior year and went over to France to fight in the war. Entire class. And when they got back, the school decided they would be awarded a degree, even though they hadn't done the final year, because they were, unless if they had good grades. So anyway, my father gets over to France. It turns out he's one of the few soldiers who can speak French, and they need somebody to talk to the French people who are stealing all the supplies. When the boat comes in with potatoes and other food supplies, these French people were starving, so they were during the night coming over and stealing all these supplies. But you couldn't shoot them because they were on our side. So they needed somebody who could speak French to them and say, well, look, I will give you have a little paper bag, I'll give you 2 potatoes and some celery and this, but that's all you're going to get. And they'd go along with it, and explain that they're for the soldiers, and we need to feed the soldiers, and they need to have, they're working hard trying to fight the enemy, so we need food for them. So they got my father to do that. Right next to where the boat came in, where he was guarding, like a pile of potatoes as high as his ceiling and stuff like that. There was a young woman living right there. And now it started out she buttering him up because she wanted some food. But then she really liked him. And, of course, in the United States, back in the 1920s, women were very inhibited. They wouldn't dream of having sex with a man until he was married and so on and so forth. But in France, that's totally different. So, plus she wanted more food. So she taught him the facts of life. Well, right before he was going to leave, she told him that she had missed her period and she thought she was pregnant. He didn't know he was going to leave. So well, he was quite excited about that. He's going to have a boy or a girl. Here he was, only 20 years old. But the following day, after she told him that, there was a knock on his door where he was living in the barracks, and they said, "You have 20 minutes to collect all your stuff, and we're putting you on the boat that just came in and taking you back to the United States." No, the military actually wanted to get people out of there because they were afraid a lot of them would stay, and their parents would be really angry that they'd taken away their beloved children and so on. So all of a sudden, my father's on the boat, and as he's going back to the United States, it occurs to him. I mean, he knew this woman's name, but he didn't know her address because she lived right next to where he was guarding the food. So he just walked up to her house and knocked on the door. He didn't really know what street it was or what number it was, or even whether she got mail or not, because back in those days, not everybody collected mail. He had no way to tell her that he loved her and that he wanted to know whether he had a son or a daughter and so on. So all his life he thought about that because he did love her, and when he got to be 85 years old, he decided he was going back to France and see if he could find her. But he didn't. When he got there, of course, their house was gone, and there was a big apartment building there, and nobody knew anything about her, and so on. So he never did find. But now I'm thinking, if I go on, now they got the DNA. Oh my God! I may turn out I have a brother or sister. They'd be dead, of course, by now, because they'd be 17 years older than I am, so they'd be 120 years old or whatever. But it'd be interesting to find out if there were little grandchildren or whatever in France that are directly related to genetically. That would be very interesting. All right, well, let me move on to. I was going to tell you the story, and I've got a lot of stuff that's interesting that I can't tell you right now because we haven't got time, unfortunately. But I descend from royalty. This is Baron Boynton's house. It's my great uncle, and I used to visit him, from time to time. And he lived in this castle, 100-room mansion, bigger than the Downton Abbey house by far. And he had a fabulous collection of Impressionist paintings and everything. He was an interesting guy also. But he died, and then he willed it all to the National Trust because he realized that he had no heirs, and he wasn't sure anybody could afford to upkeep on the property. So that's my brother and I visiting it. But I used to visit there by myself when he was alive. And Lane, when she discovered I descended from royalty, she wanted to be a member of the royal family. So I made her coffee in the morning. She saw this movie where the queen had coffee brought to her in bed in the morning. So I would do that for her. I brought her coffee in the morning, and when she was still in bed, and then I made her breakfast for her and everything. And then that's how we started the day. I didn't mind treating her like a princess. She should deserve to be a princess. Okay, so here's my story, and I'll be a few minutes over, but not too long. So, heir to the throne of Bosnia-Herzegovina. I was a scholarship student at Yale in 1952. So I was put in a room with 3 other students, and we just had one bathroom for all of us. And it seems to me we didn't have a shower. You had to go outside the door into There was a shower that a lot of people shared. If you were a paying student, then you got a double room and you had a bathroom with a shower. And if you came from a donor family, somebody very rich who was giving money to the school, then you often got a single room with your own bathroom, and it was huge, and it had a shower in it and everything. So that's the way it was. Now at Yale, it's not that. Now they do it by lottery, so they don't discriminate against scholarship students or anything. But back in my day, they did, and they made us work too. We had to work 20 hours a week. Now they don't do that anymore. Anyway, so the first day, my roommates and I went out and we bought furniture from the local Goodwill, because you have to furnish your room. And so we bought a couch that had a big hole in it and stains all over it and everything, and a bookcase that was coming unglued, so we had to, glue it together before we could even use it, and a bunch of other junk. And the beds, my God, they were 1930 beds where they have mattresses as hard as a rock and everything. Meanwhile, the guy across the hall had a single room, and his room was amazing. It had mahogany paneling on the wall. It had a real fireplace and they provided firewood for it, so you could sit by a real fire at night while you were studying. His bathroom was bigger than ours, and he was only one guy, and had a shower and everything. And he has stained glass windows that were with original designs on them that some artist had made and everything. So he was obviously either a big donor or somehow he really lucked out. He had probably the best room in the whole university. And he showed up driving a brand new Jaguar, a convertible. And then a moving truck arrived, and some men in uniform moved in all brand new furniture for his room. And I tried to make friends with him, but he said he's too busy to talk. And my roommates had the same experience. Now, we were up in a little cul-de-sac in the dormitory we were in, so it was very secret, which was good actually for him, because he turned out to be the richest person pretty much in the United States. So he probably was concerned about being bothered or being in some danger. So this was a very safe place to be. But we were right across the hall from him. My roommates tried to talk to him, and he said, well, I haven't got time to talk right now. So next thing we know, there's a little slot in the door. This is probably dating back for when Yale had wealthy people there and so on, particularly his room. And he had put a name card in there, and it was beautifully engraved, and it said, Pierre L. DuPont III. And one of my roommates said, oh, Jesus, this guy is too much. So he took a card. Actually, he took a Goodwill card. He turned it upside down. It was a blank white cardboard on the other side. He had studied calligraphy, so he wrote in beautiful script, like you see here, Richard Studley Boynton the Fourth. So this guy was the third, I was the fourth. And he inserted it into the card holder. So Mr. DuPont saw the card, and he wanted to know who I was. And one of my roommates said, promise you'll keep it a secret? He's heir to the throne of Bosnia-Herzegovina. We are his bodyguards. So when my roommates told me about later the next day, I was really embarrassed. I said, "Oh no, we got to straighten him out. I can't go through that." I said, "Oh please, we're really offended, and we're having a lot of fun with this, because now he's quite impressed, and he wants to meet you all of a sudden." So the next thing you know, he's being very friendly, and he's asking me what my major is, and I told him engineering, and then he needed help with his math homework, and I helped him. he hired a tutor after that, so he had a lot of things that most people didn't have. Well, a few weeks later, he asked me if I would like to attend a party in Greenwich with him. I said I would like to go, but you have to also invite my roommates, knowing that he knew they were my bodyguards. And he said, of course, I understand that. I know you need protection, but don't worry, it's going to be very safe. I've got everything all set up for you. So that's where we were. So he hired a stretch limousine, beautiful black stretch limousine, to take us to Greenwich, because there's now 5 of us. No car was big enough certainly not his Jaguar would take 5 people. And we arrive at this huge mansion. It's in Greenwich. And when we pull in, there are 4 brand new Rolls Royces parked in the driveway. I had never seen a single Rolls Royce in my life at that point. And here obviously brand new ones. And a butler opened the door and he ushered us in. Well, fortunately, I was dressed in a tweed 3-piece suit, so I looked like I belonged to the party. Actually, I got that from Goodwill. I normally got brand new clothing from Goodwill. And the reason why is that most grandmothers would give their grandson who went to college some beautiful piece of clothing, not realizing how big the grandson was. Well, I'm small, so it was my size that these things would be. So what I was wearing actually was a handmade tweed suit from Scotland that was just beautifully made and everything, just the kind of thing that the heir to the throne of Bosnia-Herzegovina might wear. And my roommates were all dressed up and everything because they knew this was going to be fancy. When I got to the living room, I look over and Ray Charles is playing the piano. Well, I'm naive back in those days. I thought, well, Ray must be a friend of this owner. Well, of course, now I realize they probably paid $5,000 back when that was a lot of money to get Ray Charles to come all the way from New York to here, and they might have had to rent a piano for him and everything, and just to have background music. So that's the kind of place this was. But anyway, everybody's ignoring him, and I used to play the piano in a bar, believe it or not, when I was sophomore in college. Nobody would listen to me. They would all be drinking. I wonder why the hell I was doing it. I'd be composing things. Figured I might as well make good use of my time. Somebody would come over to me and say, "Oh, I never heard that song before. What's the name of that?" I said, "Well, I haven't named it yet." "Oh, you mean you made that up?" Anyway, so I got a nice conversation with him and everything. Told him how much I liked his music. Meanwhile, these very beautiful young women were coming around, and they were serving punch. Well, I didn't realize it was vodka in it, and I don't drink alcohol, so you don't want to get into that with me. Well, all of a sudden, I realized I'm a little bit drunk. I said, "What's going on?" Well, I asked one of my roommates, and he said, "Oh, they put vodka in this. It's been spiked." Oh, jeez. So they were serving finger food. They had lobster and little miniature rolls and stuffed clams and caviar and all this other stuff. And I looked around and I realized that other than my roommates and Pierre, all the people in this party were middle-aged men. So what the hell were we doing there? There was a sort of odd sensation that we were the only young people there. And obviously these people were very wealthy because they all were driving Rolls Royces. So, they weren't your ordinary partygoers. So near the end of the evening, the host got up in front of everyone and he proposed a toast to health, happiness, and prosperity. And we were all asked to come into this one living room and sort of crowd in there. You all my best friends. He said, I'm glad you could attend my traditional Halloween party. And I said, there's a special guest at the party. And I'm thinking, I wonder who that is. I'm looking around, and to see if anybody I recognize that's famous or something. He said, it's my understanding we have the heir to the throne of Bosnia and Herzegovina with us here tonight. I'm hoping that he would be willing to say a few words to us. Well, I'm thinking, oh, Jesus. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, my God. Oh, I've blown this now. I should have been prepared. So, but he got me to come forward. Then everybody's saying, yes, we want to hear from you. Oh, come on. Oh, you can do it. Oh, once you get in that situation, you're doomed. You have to do it. So I figured, what the hell? And I'd had a little bit to drink, which I don't normally have, which is probably a good part of why I was able to pull this off. So, and I knew I'd never see any of these people again, so, what the hell? So I get up, and I take the microphone, and I say, good evening, American people, or as we say in my country, Yatu Blutovesk. I just made that up. I completely in the spur of the moment. I said, I want everybody to say that now. Yatu Blutovesk. And I'm listening to them. I said, once more, Yatu Blutovesk. Now don't say Yatu Busavuka, because that's the little rag that women wear when their urine is red. I don't know where I came up with that one, but anyway. So then I go on and I tell them, I think, what would somebody normally say if they came from a country like that and now they're in the United States? They'd be, so I said, well, the women are very beautiful, but I think they're a little scared of sex. Said, in my country, the women aren't scared of sex, they're scared of men. And I go on this theme. Everyone drives big cars as fast as they can. If you brought them over to Bosnia, they wouldn't even fit on the roads. And then, I said, the food at this party is delicious, but the food at Yale, I would not even serve to hogs. So I'm going on and on, and everybody's laughing, and I'm having all this. So near the end, I thought, and I don't know how I came up with this. Well, I used to lead singing. Some of you who know my background know I led singing all the time. I thought I should teach them the national anthem of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I said, now I want all of you, I'm going to teach you our national anthem, and I want all of you to sing along with me. So I will sing a line, and then I want you to repeat it. Yatagonsa yanyam yiftige. All right, everybody. Yatavonska yanka yiftige. Sir, you're not singing. In my country, you'd be put in prison. Next thing you know, he was singing. And then I made up this song all the way through. I don't know how I remembered, I don't know how I created it, but secondly, I had to remember what I just came up with. Back then I had a memory, though, so that was different. Because I had to sing it again all the way through, and I had just made it up a minute before that. So that was it. So at the end, everybody's complimenting me, say your English accent is excellent, and I was thank you. And he said, but you have a British accent. You must have learned this from somebody who came from England. Well, my parents spoke with a British accent, just so happened. So that's how I got that accent. When I first came to Choate, I was saying can't rather than can't, and both, and so on. But I got rid of that pretty fast. But it comes back occasionally, I guess. Anyway, when I got back to Yale that night, I kept thinking about this experience. How was I able to pull off this speech? I had everybody laughing and smiling and everything, and it was all nonsense. And the worst thing is I hadn't done my homework. If anybody had asked me any details about Bosnia, I had no idea where it was or how big it was or anything. I sort of thought of Andorra, which is about population of 70,000 and 180 square miles. Somehow I'd seen that on a map one time without knowing much about it. But it actually turns out Bosnia, which I visited more recently, has a population of 3 million, and it's 15,000 square miles, and it's a major country in Europe. So I was just, if anybody had a cell phone back then, they would have known in 5 minutes everything I said about the country was wrong. But then what you'd have to do is go to a big library and spend a half an hour just trying to find anything about it. But one last little thing. 20 years later, I was at a university women's scholarship luncheon. I sat next to a woman who told me that she grew up in Bosnia. Oh. So I told her the whole story. And she wanted to hear me speak my fake version of the language. So, and so on. She said, oh, well, that does sound a lot like our language. We have many dialects. You would have fooled me, she said. So somehow I had guessed how people would speak in that country. Well, then of course, more recently, I actually went to Bosnia. I'm not saying Jatu Bluslavest to anybody, though, because it might turn out something vulgar. but I did really see it, and so eventually I ended up I was telling the people on my trip that I used to be heir to the throne. Well, anyway, so that's my first half of this talk. And I haven't told you everything that I wanted to, but I will see what I do with that. There's going to be one more, at least one more, maybe more, depending how it goes, on Friday at 1 o'clock. So I would love to see all of you there, and thank you all for coming. It looks like we have a pretty good audience here. So.